You need truth and life. Here is the Brother Leon Show. You better recognize.
What's going on, listeners? This is your boy, Brother Leon, and you are tuning into another episode of the Brother Leon Show. So today, guys, we are going to have with us the phenomenal poet, activist, author, coach, Nathan Richardson. The one thing that I will say about Mr. Richardson is that he is the definition of a creative. Not only is he actually putting out work, he is showing people how to do work. And so the one thing that I love about this man, after reading his books and having a conversation with him, he is passionate about his art. He is passionate about his writings, his experiences. And also he is a historian of Frederick Douglass. And he has a Frederick Douglass speaking tour where he actually dresses as the character. So we are going to go into that. We're going to look into that. We're going to ask him questions on that. So guys, hey, I just want you to just wait. We're going to bring up Nathan Richardson, and I'm telling you, this interview is going to be fire, and that's the God knows truth. So hey, guys, I will bring you Nathan Richardson. Just wait.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. How you doing, Mr. Richardson?
You doing?
Hey, that's good. That's good. Hey, I was just got done doing the intro, telling the listeners about you a little bit. So, I am so looking forward to this interview. So I just want to start off with the first question. Who are you, sir? Talk to us.
My name is Nathan Richardson. I am a native of Suffolk, Virginia. Throughout my life, I spent 22 years in the military. Been retired pretty much as long as I was in there. Been a writer, storyteller, for most of my life, starting in high school or middle school, and been a youth activist, big part of my life as well, and now find myself in the peculiar position of being a understudy of Frederick Douglass and doing living history portrayals of Frederick Douglass. So that's who I am on the professional side. I have 3 beautiful children, 3 beautiful grandchildren, and 1 on the way.
Wow.
So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow, congrats. So let me ask you this: what branch of military did you retire from?
Army.
Oh, okay, good. That's real. That's real nice. Hey, thank you for your service. Seriously, thank you for that. So, you were saying that you started your writing journey when you were in school. So let me ask you this: Did your poetry and spoken word, did that sort of kind of shape you into the person that you are right now? Do you have any poets or writers, who you just admire their careers?
Well, it's kind of an evolution that I discovered exactly the connection between the oral tradition and the written word. I thought initially that I had discovered the written word because in school I was introduced to Langston Hughes and Edgar Allan Poe. And, I was reading them on the page. The teacher introduced those poets to me on the page. Mm-hmm. But it was only later on that I always have to give credit to the hip hop generation that because they are an evolution of the spoken word, all the way from the African griot and Homer and all of that.
Yeah.
that they helped me understand that my awakening as a poet was not on the page. It was actually the fact that I was born into a community of storytellers and griots, and I was that kid who was always, interested in what the old heads were talking about, the stories, the farmers. I grew up in a rural community, and so the stories they were telling were an oral tradition that I picked up on. My dad, especially. So that's what originally, set my mindset. And then when I got back from Germany in the early '80s, that was like the dawning of the spoken word generation in our culture, and that immediately woke me up to say, "Wow, I've heard this before. This sounds familiar." Yeah. The poems that I have written on page need to be spoken out loud, right? And so that's what I did, and that was that's kind of like how I got started as a spoken word artist.
Okay, so may I ask you this? I know maybe I might be getting a little personal, but what were some of the lessons that you learned from your father?
Oh wow, that's kind of funny. I actually have a quote in one of my chapbooks that says, "I am to my father what my father was to me." A textbook of examples of what to be and what not to be.
Okay.
But I got a great father. He's a wonderful guy. He's old school. Definitely a guy who tells stories time and time again. I mean, you're going to hear the same story more than once from my dad. So, that was a direct impact, with him, being around him, listening to him give history. I mean, he's the type of guy for our community. We grew up in a community of, say, 200, 300 Black people living in a rural community.
Yeah.
Lots of kids. Every family had at least 3 to 10 kids. And but he can actually go out to the cemetery where the main church in our community, where many of the graves are unmarked, and he can walk through the cemetery to an unmarked grave and tell you who's buried there, who's married to who, how many children they had, that type of thing. That's the type of griot he is. So it's definitely true that if the library, that when the griot dies, if nobody has got the books, the library burns down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I get from my dad.
All right. Thank you for that. So let me ask you this. When did you start really getting into the whole activism thing? Was it during your writing journey? Was it during the time you were in the military, or was it like after you got out of the military?
It was probably, I don't know, the seeds of activism don't necessarily start with a protest. It really shouldn't start with a protest or the killing of an Eric Gardner or Mike Brown or Breonna Taylor. That's not where activism should start.
Okay.
Activism for me started just by listening to my elders, finding a discipline. You might call it a discipline. Some people call it a path, a way, a toe, a spiritual journey. I'm a black belt in martial arts, and so so I had three pillars. For me, I had really had three pillars. That was family, martial arts, and then the military. Those were the three pillars that kind of like set me up to be like this conscious type of person who's aware, right, and focused, right? So when I came out of the military and I started doing spoken word, and then I was just fortunate to meet this wonderful activist, abolitionist, modern day abolitionist. Her name is Deidre Love, and her organization is called Teens with a Purpose. And so I started working alongside her, as many people do. She's a person that makes you just want to, follow her. Like, what are you doing? Can I help you? Type of thing. And so then that's where I really got involved with activism with teens. That organization is just the model for the world in how to be a teen activist, because it's an organization that's peer led. So that means that however much knowledge you got, it's not really about you. It's about the teens. They are talented and intelligent young people, and if you give them the opportunity, they can come up with their own ideas. They can change their own culture. So I was explaining this to somebody last night, that you have generations of young people who are affecting change in their peers. And so all you have to do is be there to help facilitate their ideas and how they want to do things,
Yeah.
And so that's where I really got my journeyman's training in youth activism with that organization, Teens with a Purpose.
Wow. Thank you for that. Let me ask you this, being as though we're talking about activism, do you find at times that there's pressure or there's a weight, and being woke at times like this? Because sometimes it's like when you start seeing, things that are happening, or there's, does it seem like at times it's a frustration or it's a burden just being woke in today's society when you look at everything that's happening right now?
Well, I wish that we could all, that more of us could be more actively engaged in humanity.
Yeah.
So like I said, you wouldn't have to all of a sudden wake up one day and find out you're in a society that doesn't necessarily care for you. That in fact, in some cases, they don't pray for you, but they pray for you or pray on you.
Yes.
For most people, that really should start at around the age of, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, really. That's when it started happening for me. I can remember, being outside, sitting, leaning against my dad's truck, listening to Earth, Wind and Fire and all those cats, and saying, wow, outside of the world that I'm currently in, there is a world out there, and I want to see what it's like. Most people are introspective, and unfortunately they carry that introspection too long in their life, where you don't look outward into the world and look at other people. So I think that's something that's immediately reflective in poetry. When you see, you read, you hear the poet, are they looking inward or are they looking outward? It's a huge difference, and it's immediately it's like the jazz music, where within it's like the best jazz, Miles Davis, in anywhere from 3 to 6 notes, he can set up a whole story. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
3 to 6 notes. That's all it takes. And so with poetry, it's the same thing. When a poet starts speaking, you immediately can determine where he's coming from, whether he's coming from an introspective point of view or he's looking out into the world and into the future, right? So, these are like the basic elements of what's happening now, and so, once you do wake up, right, you are, in a tight learning curve.
Yeah.
And the centrifugal force right now in America, man, like will run you in the ditch.
Yeah, you're right.
If you ain't holding on, right?
Yeah, you're definitely right about that, Mr. Richardson. That's the God knows truth. I want to ask you, because you sent me your book, The Seven. And so, The Seven is the last poems of an unarmed citizen. And I wanted to ask you about the poem called The Incredible Likeness of Being. And I love the part where it says, what kind of hypocrite is the black man who does not want his son hated by the white man, but objects when his daughter is loved by one? And that line right there caught me. I was like, wow. So can you tell us about the seven?
Yeah, well, these times call, beg us to speak, if we're brave enough to speak. And certainly from the artist's point of view, we're always trying to translate what we see into something, that we're trying to describe it, what we see in America. And so for me, I've always been doing it. I've always been doing that. And so then when this happened, this recent surge, I was like, okay, so what can I say? And then it was basically, what can you say you haven't said before, right? No, I'm not trying to, promote myself as a thinker. I'm talking about all the thinkers before me. They have already said it. If you go back to Langston Hughes, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, he's already spoken on all of this. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So if we've already said it, then why do we need to say it again? We need to ask ourselves, why do we need to say this again? So that's why I just went back to my body of work and found what I said 10, 15, 20 years ago that unfortunately still relevant, right? Yes. Don't want to be able, wish that poem would have died type of shit. Excuse my
No, that's all right. That's all
right. And so that's what I did. I got those poems. I pulled them out. I'm a person who, I'm just kind of a person that really wants to touch people. I go with the spirit of the human, and so we do have these forces pulling from either side that pull us apart. One of the reasons that I left my community, I joined the military, is that I actually was like, okay, now I can believe everything that I'm being told in this little bubble that I'm living in, or I can get out of here and go see the world and find out what people are really like, Go find out, okay, go find a Jap and see if he is like what they say he is, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, once I got out into humanity, I saw that, I was not being told an accurate description of humanity. I was not being given an accurate description of humanity. I actually left home misinformed from the standpoint that, and I named my first book, The Incredible Likeness of Being, like meaning the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I was under that impression that I was just looking for people like me, and I did find people like me. But the truth of the matter is that both are important. Our likenesses and our differences are what we should be embracing. Because, who wants to live in an homogenized vanilla or chocolate world, right? I want to go somewhere and taste their wine, taste their food, dance to their music, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's where we are.
Yeah. I love that poem, The Incredible Likeness of Being. And I'm not going to lie.
So, it is a sort of a stark kind of hypocrisy if you define love that way, that the only definition of love is that I am not hated, right?
Yeah.
That's not the true definition. Okay, the definition of love is not that nobody hates. The definition of love is, can I love somebody?
Yeah.
One of my favorite songs is forgive me if I call it incorrect. Oh, it's actually Nat King Cole, Nature Boy.
Okay.
And in that song, he's talking about this boy. He goes out into the world, and the old school guys are telling him, they're giving him lessons about life and love. And then the refrain, the refrain is, the only thing you will ever learn is just to love and be loved in return.
Yeah.
The greatest thing you will ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. Oh my God.
Yeah.
How many times I played that song, man? I mean, it's just, wow.
So let me ask you this: with your travels in the military, and seeing different things, what did it do for your perspective when it came to, race relations in the U.S.? Because I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna give you a personal experience of mine. My first time traveling to Canada, I got to Canada, I was like, man, I feel so free here, and I mean the people were just nice. I think probably the only setback that I had is that I didn't speak French. That was it.
Right. Well, one of the things that the problem that we have is that we only know the world from our house or from our block or from our state or from our, country. If you don't know what race is like in other places, then you don't have a full picture of what race in the world is and the definition of race and racism. Yeah. Everywhere the mutual definition of racism is the race to the top.
Yeah.
The race to have more. So that goes beyond skin color, nationality, whatever. Wherever it is, the country has a race to the top, but that's only part of the story because, all these things live simultaneously at the same time. One does not off the other. It is true that we have racism and it is true that we have unity at the same time.
Okay.
So, so I saw racism in the military. I saw racism abroad. And then the things that I saw as a young person was then reconfirmed when I was coaching the Hampton Roads Youth Poets and spoken word poets, young spoken word poets. And then we were involved in the Brave New Voices International Poetry Slam. This is an international event where young poets come together from all over the world. And when you have these young people from the age of from 13 to 19 years old on stage, spitting poetry, spitting their truths, it's remarkable that basically everybody sees the same thing, wherever you are in the world. The kids from Cape Town, South Africa, see the same thing that the kids in America see. The kids in Leeds, England, see the same thing that the kids in Alaska see. You know, they're telling you the same story of what's wrong with humanity, right?
Yes, definitely. Let me ask you this, because here's the one thing, and you were saying that you started doing your activist work with teens. So let me ask you this: what is the wisdom that you would give Black teenage boys today?
Oh wow, they're the future. You know, they're the future. They're actually more in depth than we were or I was at my age, because they have access to, you know, the digital world, which everything is instant. And even if they are not consciously aware of their knowledge, it is there because it is passed by their eyelids, right? Mm-hmm. And if it passes by your eyes, you have seen it, and it is in your brain, whether you recall it or not. So comparing that to me when I left home at 19 years old, had never been even out. I think I might have been outside the state of Virginia one time at 19. These kids, you know, have information overload, and so they are conscious. They're conscious of things. It's in their subconscious, even though they might be not aware of what's going on. So through creativity, they have they're gifted. Their gifts make room for them in the space where they can actually understand what they're seeing. They can try to explain it through poetry, through rap, through the arts, you know. And those kids are the ones who, you know, are the blessed ones. Because if you don't have that outlet, then, or if you haven't found it, then the future looks kind of bleak, you know. It's like a bleak future because you have no outlet. One of the kids helped me define this. I was thinking this for several months, and I was in a classroom in Norfolk, Virginia, at Granby High School, and I go back to this class just about every year. The teacher in that classroom is one of the most phenomenal teachers. He's the kind of guy, you know, makes you want to go back to high school kind of teachers. And so I'm in this class, and I'm, you know, this idea is in my head, and I'm talking to the kids, and I say it, but it's not, you know, I guess, you know, the way you would describe it does not have the correct iambic pentameter, or in the language of rap, it does not have the right count or the right beat. And I say it in the class, and then the kid is like, he notices that I'm off beat, right? And he says, say that again. And then I say, better your anger and fears flow like ink from a pen on a page or paint on a canvas than blood on the sidewalk. And, wow. He said, say it again so I can write it down. Better your anger and tears flow like ink from a pen or paint onto a canvas than blood on the sidewalk. So, we have to make sure that the youth find whatever kind of gift, light that they have within inside of them. So that's the only thing that can combat the darkness is light.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you said something like that, because my next question is, do you consider your work at times spiritual and ministry for the community as well as to the teens?
Yeah, not by design. I was actually running away from being a preacher.
Yeah, we all been there.
I got like so many preachers in my family, man. It's like, and they're like, yeah, you're going to be a preacher too, boy. No, I don't think I am. It's got to be another way, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get the word out there. So, not by design.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So how do you see God in the black church in particular?
Oh, wow. So, the African American community is not, monolithic. We have a lot of Christians, but we also have, Nation of Islam. We have Black Jews. We have Moors. These are, minority religions, but still they have great influence. And so, we have to understand religion or faith as a whole. I was actually kind of disappointed. I came out of high school, never really taken any college courses. I think I might have taken 3 college courses in my lifetime. One of those was Religions of the World.
Yeah.
Religions of the World. And I get there and I have this Christian preacher basically just teaching me about Christianity. And I'm like, I came here to learn about religions of the world,
Yes.
So, we need to have an understanding of the origins of our faith, and all the influences of our faith. Your faith must be rooted in soil deeper than the flower box you were planted in.
Yeah.
We're planted in a flower box. By virtue, fortune, or misfortune of your birth, you ended up somewhere, right?
Yes.
Good gracious, are you going to ever question that? Whether it's fortune or misfortune?
Yeah. Yeah, I know some people, they do question that.
I'm just being totally serious about it, because, the way, of what I understand now, especially in America and the teachings of Christianity, we have to be very careful because, as Frederick Douglass described it, there were 2 distinct Christianities in America.
Yeah.
One by the slave-holding master, and then one of the true Christ. Which one, do you espouse to?
Yeah. Because I take the position of decolonizing my faith and taking every aspect of, the European white Jesus out of it and everything. And so, with decolonizing my faith, I'm starting to understand that, if I'm made in the image of God, God looks like me and I look like him. So,
Well, one thing I do know from my travels in the military,
Yes.
wherever you go, people are going to make God look like them. They're going to make Jesus look like them.
Oh, yeah.
If you're in the Philippines, guess what?
He looks like a Filipino.
That might not be really stark difference, but he looks a little bit more like a Filipino than he does, So that's a human characteristic. But the real foundational question is, for a people that has been given or introduced to a Christ, do they accept that Christ without question? So we can say that we were given in America, especially during the period of our diaspora, we were given a Christ who looked like them, and we, for the most part, accepted that Christ, even though it did not look like us. So the question is, if it was the other way around, if we introduced a Christ who looked like us, would they accept him?
Oh, I'll be honest. No, they probably wouldn't. They get a problem, man. People get a problem when you put Black Jesus up.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
here's where you silence. You don't need to say no more.
Yeah. Yeah. People get a problem when you start talking Black Jesus, even though, it does give the description of, his hair
if
being
you're
like
saying
wool.
it doesn't matter, and this is, this is the argument. What difference does, when it's to the point where you really can't explain it, and you don't have, a thorough understanding of it. You have not explored your faith. Then the opt out is, well, what difference does it really matter?
Oh, yeah.
That's unfortunately always the opt out when you don't have answers. But what difference does it really matter?
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To some degree it matters. It don't matter to God, but it matters to us and how we serve humanity. It does matter.
Yeah, it does.
How we look at the rest of humanity, it absolutely does matter.
Yeah, it definitely does, because I think probably one of my biggest indictments against the church is that, through the church, slavery came into being. But I also believe that with the church as well, that healing and restoration can come. But the one thing that I've seen in light of current events is that it will be silent. And I just don't understand, how is it that, the church can be silent on issues when it comes to injustice, when it comes to, fighting for things that are right. If we call ourselves Christians, if we call ourselves followers of Jesus, then why are you participating, with your silence? And I saw that with George, definitely with George Floyd. But, when it comes to other issues, very vocal on abortion, very vocal on, praying for our police and everything. Very vocal on other issues. But when it comes to issues in other communities, very silent. So I think that's probably my biggest thing. I had the opportunity to interview with the Black Hebrews, and I saw their whole belief system from a totally different perspective when you look at what they believe and what the Black Christian Church believes. So it was definitely an eye opener.
Well, this is the incredible thing about Frederick Douglass, as his understudy for the last 7 years. And the thing about you can't study Douglass without studying everything else, because he read everything else. He had 5,000 books in his library.
Yes.
So there is actually a book that he wouldn't have had access to, but I have read, and everybody should read it. It's called Stamped from the Beginning. Stamped like as a postage stamp, or like you stamp a letter. Stamped from the Beginning, a definitive history of slavery in the world. And I don't know the name of the author, but in this book, it describes slavery throughout the entire history of mankind and the causes of it, the primary causes of it, and all those things, all those tools that were used to mitigate or subjugate those people who were enslaved. Right?
Yes.
And so throughout history, we see this, and Douglass, man, he was able to read volumes and then boil it down into just a phrase that lets you know he had an understanding. So his quote is, it was not God, but man it was not color but crime that created slavery. It was not God but man. It was not color but crime that created slavery. So he could have, really come out of the brutality of slavery, even though he did not, physically experience, except for, when he was on this particular plantation with the one slave master who actually put the lash to him on a continuous basis. But he actually saw brutality. And he could have easily come out of that experience saying, yeah, these are just white people, and this is what they do. Yeah, okay. In this particular scenario, it is. You look back, if you start going back into history, you're going to find that throughout the entire history of mankind, slavery has existed. Now, that's not an opt-out for anybody who's claiming, well, the slave masters of our society, they were doing what everybody else has done throughout time. No, can't call that cop-out, right? But what it is saying is that you need to recognize what fuels racism and people, the subjugation of people, and that is racism, a race top, a race for more, capitalism, unchecked.
Yes, exactly. I think probably, the fact that, we do have the racism.
I mean, people talk about, I'm going back to Africa. Okay, right now I got friends in Nigeria.
Yeah.
In SARS. It's the same thing going on. You better know what constitution you leaving and which one you going to.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely, exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're having these whole, talks and arguments around reparations. Because I feel as though I'm like, hey, look, y'all benefited from it. Oh, Sarah, you wouldn't have white privilege without slavery. So, something has to give. But I'm glad you started mentioning Frederick Douglass, because I want to go into the whole thing about your Frederick Douglass speaking tour. So can you tell us, how did you get into that?
Wow, I wish I had like $10 every time I've been asked that. Right? I always give credit where credit is due. My sister, Sheila Arnold, who is a phenomenal storyteller, and we were working together at a theater festival. And of course, I'm not an actor at all. People mistake me for an actor. I am I portray or I interpret living history, which is different on a deeper level. But anyway, she was like, you should be doing some Black historian, historical figure, She said, we got a lot of women out here doing, Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells. We got a few people doing Ida B. Wells. We got a few women doing Sojourner Truth, but there is not a lot of men out doing Black characters. There's a handful doing Martin Luther King. They'll recite the Martin Luther King speech or whatever, I Have a Dream speech. But on a whole, there's not enough Black men doing characters, And so I was like, kind of like on my spoken word ego trip. And I was like, yeah, whatever, I got this going on right over here. But then she was insistent, she was like, yeah, a year later, we were back at the same spot, and she was like, look, I'm telling you right now. She was like, I'm not telling you who to do, just look at it. And so I was like, okay, I'm getting a little bit older. I might not be as relevant as I used to be. So I'm just being straight. How your conscience talks to you,
Yeah.
And so I started looking. I was looking at Booker T. Washington, that kind of thing. And then I saw Douglass, and I was close to the appearance. I had a resemblance, you know. I had the complexion. I had a gray beard at the time, and most of the older pictures of Douglass, of the senior Douglass, he has, you know, the beard. And so I said, well, you know, that's the one that I could pull off physically. Let's see what he is actually saying, right? And then when I started reading his speeches, oh my God. You know, I just came to the immediate conclusion, this is the dopest spoken word poet of the 19th century.
Wow. So
you know,
let me ask you
are
this.
no recordings.
No. Go ahead. No recordings of what?
No, I was saying, you know, there are no recordings of his voice, right? But you do have many, many speeches. And so if you are a spoken word poet, you know what the voice sounds like off the page. You can hear it. You can look at the page and start reading a poem and hear the voice of that writer. And so that's how I came into Douglass, by reading his work and understanding and actually hearing his voice and his cadence and, you know, that kind of thing. So, that's how I got it. That's how I got into Frederick Douglass.
Well, it almost sounds like that Frederick Douglass chose you. That's what it sounds like.
Oh, that hit me maybe like, you know, I've been doing this 7 years, maybe like the third, fourth year. I suddenly started realizing, he probably found you. You didn't really find. Don't be like bragging on that, right? He probably found you. He's probably like, okay, young man, you know, you've experienced some things I've experienced, and I have. I mean, you know, I'm a lot like him in some categories. And I have actually been told this too. I mean, I've been, especially by actors who come to me and like, if I'll do a performance, and they'll come to me and they'll be like, well, what did you study? You know, did you go to Juilliard or whatever? You know, and that's a wonderful compliment, but, you know, I didn't study anywhere. You know, I've learned in the same manner that he learns, like self-made man type of thing.
Wow.
And so then they're immediately like, wow, that's probably why you're so damn good, because, you know, you don't have any other intellectual type of teachings that would give you a different vernacular. Your vernacular is most closest to what he was than if you were a trained actor or a trained scholar and then came back into Douglass and tried to portray Douglass, right?
Yeah. Wow, that's good.
And so then further, then that goes to what all interpreters want people to understand, or really want, you know, the whole collective of historians to understand, that it is a partnership between scholars and spoken word artists and those types of people that tell the story in a vernacular that the general public can understand. Because if I am Dr. So-and-so, PhD of American Studies, and I hold a lecture, you know, at the Attic Theater, basically who's going to come?
Yeah.
A few people from, you know, generally that are history buffs and that kind of thing. Okay. But for the average person walking down the street, you know, even the wino who once had his head on and was like thinking about these things, the vernacular of Sojourner Truth or the vernacular of Harriet Tubman is what captures the imagination of the people. And so if you are able to speak through that vernacular, then you can reach the average person quicker than you could if you were speaking in a say a more intellectual vernacular, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
So I'm always trying to collaborate with historians, the academics, and I've been fortunate enough to do that because a lot of them do understand that. They understand that, I read your books, you give me advice, I call you on the phone and say, okay, how do I interpret this? That type of thing. And then we have this partnership where, I teach what you've been, what you wrote, as well as the character, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, then we have some, some in the community, and this is another human nature thing where, we have the ego thing going on where, no, they at this level and I'm at this level and that type of thing, So, but, the positive is greater than the negative.
That's great. So let me ask you this. Do you remember your first show doing the Frederick Douglass speaking tour? Do you remember the first time you ever took the character on stage?
I got a lawnmower standing by me right now.
Okay.
I came out to this park in Portsmouth. It's like really peaceful, serene out here, huge. And this is grass cutting day, so that was out on the lawnmower. So yeah. So what were you saying now?
No, I was asking you. Do you remember your first time? Do you remember your first show doing Frederick Douglass?
Yeah. Well, the first show, the first performance I did actually was not even in character. I didn't have regalia on, none of that. I just had memorized. There's an excerpt of Douglass's speech, "What to the Slaves of the 4th of July." Now, everybody, a lot of celebrities have done this. James Earl Jones has done this. Danny Glover has read it. And so I took that particular interpretation of the speech and I memorized it. And I just did it at this event. And I was just trying it out and they was like, wow, yo, who is that? And so, that was the first time. And then I said, well, okay, now I have to decide if I'm going to commit to Douglass because this could be life changing. And so I really had to sit down and just really say, hey man, if you ain't going to do this all the way, don't be messing with the ancestors like that. Right. Yeah. So I went ahead, I went out, couldn't find a wig. I ended up at this costume shop, Party Costumes, and I bought this straight Mac Daddy wig that was crazy looking. Straight and white, Reverend Dr. Love or something, right? And I went home and I put it on, and when I came out, at the time, my wife was like, what? She freaked out. She was like, I shaped it, And so I looked, a lot like Douglas, even then, with that wig. And she was freaking out. She was like, oh, I thought somebody different walked in the house. So then I went out, and I did the first performance, and it was great. And then, one right after another, I had just happened to be called to do this at a time where whoever, the powers that be, the ethos, they knew that the notoriety of Frederick Douglass would be rising in the world. He would be coming back to speak to them. Even if I was not here, that would have happened. That people would be looking back in the history and say, who was actually speaking power to truth in the 19th century? It was Frederick Douglass. So I've just been fortunate to be on the crest of that wave. As any writer, you don't want to be too far ahead of your time because you will be a dead poet before they realize what you were saying, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to be behind the curve because it might be another century before your time comes again. I was like on this like humongous wave, and it's been like a beautiful thing.
That's great. That's great because it reminds me of that scripture. Many are called, but few are chosen, and you were chosen.
Yeah.
For that time, you were chosen, to do that for right now. So how has it taken off? I mean, because it seemed like that thing blew up.
Yeah. Okay. Make the rounds there like every 5 minutes. Okay. I'm back.
Okay. Yeah. No, what I was asking was, so how has it taken off? Because it just seems like, when I was reading and looking at it, I was like, wow, man, this thing done taken off. So how has the speaking tour, how has it done?
Oh yeah. I have traveled all over the country in 7 years. I've probably done close to 300 performances. West Coast, East Coast, down south, Georgia, go up to New York. I'm up to Rochester, New York area about 3-4 times a year. So that actually, it's kind of like hustle. It's like hustle. It's knowing the business side of your art form.
Yeah.
And treating it like a business and getting up every day like you're going to work. You just enjoying your work. Yeah. So I work it. I work it. I mean, I never, even when I first stepped out on this, you have to have an understanding. Like if you are doing well at something, and you're like wondering if you get, like they say, like the church folks say, I'm gonna step out on faith.
Yeah.
You better be sure that the works I've done, mixed in that faith, because the scripture actually says, faith without works is dead, right?
Yes.
So step out on faith if you want to. So I'm always working not on what I'm doing now. I try not to be overly excited or impressed with what I'm doing right now. I might be doing a lot of stuff right now. What am I doing 3 months, 6 months from now? Because if there's nothing in the future, there is some problems. You come into a cliff where you're going to have to stop and fall over. So when I stepped out on that, and actually that was before Douglas, you have to say, okay, this is October the 15th, but how much revenue, how much people have made commitments to you in February, March, and April that you still have work, that somebody still wants to hear you speak about Douglas. So with that, you have to know, as you probably know, this is real live radio coming to you from the park where they're cutting grass. Yeah, so you have to have, you got to do some work to make your radio show go. You gotta promote it. You got to be willing to invest some of your capital that you're making back into what you're doing,
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then you're going to be making moderate gains,
Yeah. So Benzo, you're talking about that. Let me ask you this. Can you tell us about your publishing company and its mission and its mission statement?
Well, the mission statement of my company, Spiritual Concepts Publishing, is breaking down the racial and religious borders of society through unique messages of God's unconditional love. That's that's my mission. It has no horizon. It's not something that I can say, all right, I have done that. I will never be able to fully complete that objective. But I decided to do that or make that my mission statement just because of all the things and the way that I look at the world, and all the things we've been talking about in this conversation.
Yeah.
And it actually rules and governs how and who I work with, right? Because if I'm not, when somebody calls me and says, we want you to come, poetry or Douglas, then I'm doing my due diligence to say, all right, so who am I talking to? What do they have to offer more than a paycheck, right? What is their mission? Does it mirror mine, right? Can we really work together harmoniously to serve the same purpose in the world? And so as long as I make that my objective, then everything else, fortunately for me, happens. So it is never, and now for a commercial from L&W's Lawn Care. I'm feeling good this morning. I'm feeling good.
That's great. So let me ask you. No, go ahead.
Yes. No, so I tell you, I really, really, really judge myself in this capacity. When I do an event, the only measure of success that I make is what did my audience look like? Did I bring all men unto me? All men, not just an audience of white people, not just an audience of black people, not just an audience of Jews, not just an audience of Christians, but did I offer an opportunity for those people to hear each other or hear a perspective that they never considered before? Yeah. That's always like when I'm on my way home, I'm flying home, I'm driving home, I get home, I'm reevaluating what I have accomplished. That's the first measure.
Okay. That's great. So, the fact that you're trying to reach people like that definitely says a lot. So let me ask you this, and I'm gonna change it up a little bit. You work with teams, you coach them. So what is your coaching style when you're coaching poets and authors on how to get into the whole field of writing, into their whole journey?
Right. Well, to let them speak their truth, that's the first thing. Because it has to be true. Of a poet that's not speaking their own truth, then you are not translating truth and then, when you're not speaking your truth, when you're trying to be somebody else, then the people who you are acting like really know that you are not who you say you are. Right?
Yeah.
So the only way you can even get close to telling somebody else's truth is that you have to spend time understanding that person. So, a lot of writers start out writing about self. Then when they journey out and they venture out and they start looking outward, then they start writing about other people that they may admire or they despise. And then that's where the writer has an obligation to understand. So if I have a young poet that comes to me and he says, hey, I got this poem about Nat Turner. I'm like, let me read it. And I read it and I'm like, wow, that's like a good start, yo. Okay, let's do this. We're fortunate. We only live like 35 miles from Cortland. Let's drive down and walk in the footsteps of Nat Turner. That's what we did. We went down there whole day Saturday, like 7 hours, chasing the footsteps in that Turner. Come back 2 weeks later, kid writes a killer poem. Killer Nat Turner. Personifies Nat Turner. You know.
Yeah.
So, you know, I started as a lay poet. Most of the poets you meet, young people, they start as lay poets. They might not even be going into a career as a writer, as a literary person, or teaching English or whatever, you know. But I always tell them this, even when I walk into a classroom and they say, Mr. Richardson is here to teach poetry, and the other kids who are not poetry, they're like, stop, poetry. And I'm like, this is not about poetry. Poetry is just a vehicle. This is about building a vocabulary that helps you explain how much you love anything that you want to, right? Poets are just explaining their love for poetry, right?
Yes.
Musicians, some of them can play and they can't talk. But, I mean, imagine the ones who can play and talk, the ones who can play and then tell you about how they play and make you want to play. An engineer who don't just know how to put the blocks together, the bricks together, the steel together, but he can actually describe how much he loves building things, and you will be like, Jesus Christ. Oh my God, I never saw that. So that's the power of language, and that's what poetry does. It gives you a vocabulary on a basic level. So, you know, you may be a spoken word poet for the first few years of your life, and then you go to college, and then the next thing you know, you are going in this other direction. But guess what? You have this verbal skill set that puts you above all the rest.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the ability to explain, to promote, to sell, right? To even, on a basic level, to even ask for a raise. They're unfortunately, we have people who cannot even know they need a raise. They know they have a wife who can't work and 3 children, and they're taking care of their mother too, and they just get minimum wage, and they haven't gotten a raise in, a year and a half. They don't even know how to explain that to their supervisor, verbally or on paper. They don't know how to express a grievance. On the most fundamental level, write a poem or two in your lifetime.
Wow. And it just, it will give you the ability to be able to unpack everything.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that wisdom. Hey, we definitely got to do another show. That's the God knows truth. So let me ask you this. I want to go back to Frederick Douglass. Do you consider yourself a Frederick Douglass historian?
That's, that's the title I've been given. I mean, I think long and hard before I put something before or after my name. People describe you in certain ways, thank you, whatever. I appreciate that people call me doctor. Like, wow, Dr. Richardson or whatever. But basically, before I put a title before my name, poet, I am a poet. Part of my identity. I can put that there safely. Author, yeah, I can safely put that there because I have actually written 3 books. Got 2 more in the works. But a title like historian, then I have to think twice because I have no letters, I have no credentials, and so that has to be left up for other people to certify that.
Okay, I see that
appreciate
happen.
It. I appreciate that. So I have to humbly accept that title of historian.
Yeah.
And so now you do see that before my name or after my name when I'm introducing myself in my bio, but it did not come just because, I said so.
So let me ask you this: in light of COVID-19, have you had to change things up? With the speaking tour.
Ooh, shoot. Man, yes sir. February is like the black man is popular.
Yeah.
I'm serious, man. For the last 2 years, this past year, just before COVID, I did 28 performances in 29 days.
Wow.
And then the second week of March, it came to a screeching halt, right?
Yeah.
And then fortunately for the technology and Zoom and everything, people started coming back around and said, yeah, okay, we still got to have this history. And so then the organizations started calling me, can you do Zoom? Can you do Zoom? Can you do Zoom? And so I've still been writing, but it's actually been a blessing too, because it's given me time to get back to the writing, to writing poetry. And so, I've definitely written some stuff, during the quarantine that was long overdue, that I didn't have time to do, while I was on tour, while I was on that heavy tour,
Wow. So, hey, man, Mr. Richardson, the one thing that I will say is that you are definitely an artist. That's the God knows truth. I just want to say that about you today. And I want to say thank you. So let me ask you this. If people want to get in contact with you for coaching, for publishing, how can they get a hold of you?
My website is www.scpublishing.com. S as in spiritual, C as in concepts, publishing.com. My phone number is 757-535-1505. And I'm very fortunate that you can actually Google my name. So yeah, if you want to get in contact with me, please do. Although I do want to clarify that my company is not a publishing company per se, as if I publish other people. I do not. I had to make that turn and that decision early, like 15, 20 years ago, that my publishing company publishes my work, and I do consulting and I teach workshops on publishing. But unfortunately, I have to leave publishing other people to other people who specialize in that. I can't do everything.
Okay.
So, but I appreciate that compliment, the people's poet, because I would not be where I am for all. I mean, I'm telling you, Hampton Roads is like this incredible appellation of creative talent, poets, writers, novelists, singer-songwriters, artists. Wow. I mean, I can just start naming them, and then somebody's going to get mad because they didn't get named, but I'm serious. It's just, and then being able to work with them, being able to work with people, artists like Clayton Singleton and Jerome Meminger, visual artists, being able to have your work interpreted through song by songwriters. That's what takes everybody to the next level by collaboration.
Yes.
And I love, my colleagues in the 757. I'm not going to give nobody on the major stage props before I give my people props. I ain't going to share. I ain't going to share nobody.
Yeah.
If I'm going to share somebody, I'm going to share my people's stuff,
Yeah.
who on the way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's me. That's
Yeah.
me. You can, everybody do your own thing, right? You can shout out to whoever, but just for me, I know some incredible talents that never been seen before. People ask me, as a martial artist, do you think anybody was better than Bruce Lee? Of course. Do you think anybody was ever better than Michael Jordan or LeBron? Of course. They never even had the opportunity to step on the court.
Yeah.
Of course there was. You just never saw them. We never saw them.
Yeah, exactly. So let me ask you this. Can you please tell people how can they purchase your books and get your merchandise? Because that's the one thing. Just, I got your book the 7th. And oh my God, I'm like, man, everybody needs to get this book. Seriously.
Yeah. You can go to my website. I don't have a store on my website, but you can go to the contact page and then just send me an email. About what book you want or what program you want, whatever, and then I will respond immediately. I mean, this is my occupation, so, and that is my store. My website is my store, and I'm not trying to sound like monetary, but I'm in the store. I can go to the cash register,
yeah,
and like ring you up. So send me an email and I'll respond most of the time before the end of the day. And I hope to hear from you. If nothing else, just talk. I like talking.
Okay.
As you probably can tell, I love talking.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: if people want to get you for the speaking tour, how can they do that as well? Because there may be some people who may be teachers who want to try to get you, to do some Zoom, because I know everybody's doing stuff remotely, doing Zoom, doing Skype. How can they grab hold of you for that as well?
Yeah, same way. Go to my website. There's a page there are 2 Douglas pages on my website that specifically talk about my programs. I not only do Douglas as a solo performance, but I work with a myriad of other incredibly talented historical interpreters. So, I mean, I do Self-Made Men, which is Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. I do Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. I have Harriet Tubman across the country that, depending on where you are, I will call that Tubman and say, hey, we got a gig in your area. And then you have Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman come. All the suffragists, I've worked with in that category. One of my last performances this year is a performance with Susan B. Anthony. And so it's just a variety of things because in the beginning, starting out, people were calling me and they were like, we'd like to have Frederick Douglass. They would, and I would say, well, I'm all booked up. It's February. I'm all booked up. And I said, well, what about July? And they'd be like, well, we were hoping to get you for Black History Month. And then after about hearing that a couple of times, I was like, look, we Black all year long.
Yeah, exactly.
We Black all year long, Discover history anytime you say so. We need to get out of this box, right? We need to get out of this 28, 29-day box. Let me give y'all some reasons why Frederick Douglass is relevant in February, in July, in September, in, whatever time of the year you decide to have a conversation. Because if you're talking about Lincoln, you can talk about Douglass. If you're talking about truth, you can talk about Douglass. You're talking about anybody in the 19th century, he was connected with them. And so he can be a part of that conversation aside from the fact that we are conditioned to think in a certain way in a certain box, and we have to break ourselves out of that. Even the African American community, the Black church, is like, well, we were hoping to get you for February, and I'm like, hey, we Black all year long.
Yeah, exactly.
You control your pulpit. You know, whatever comes in there, you know, you say stuff, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But hey, I look at it like this. I'm like, man, come on. Like you said, we're Black all year long. I mean, you know, we got Juneteenth. We got the whole month of February. I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, we got all the time in the world to learn about us, because that's our detriment. Our detriment is we don't know our history.
Right.
You know, and the crazy thing is, I really didn't start learning about Black history until after I graduated. And that's the God knows truth. So, but I mean, I ain't gonna lie. They did give us, I think probably the one thing I learned, they gave us Martin Luther King and Harriet Tubman. And that was it. That's what they gave us in school. Yeah.
Well, you know, and we know, we understand the system. We understand the narrative that has been told, that is only basically one side of the coin type of thing. And so because we know that, then that should be used as a reason, not an excuse to say we know or don't know something, because, you know, learning is a lifelong process, and there's learning outside of the classroom. So they might not teach it in school, but the books are available.
Yeah.
And even outside of books now, in this modern era, you have Siri.
Yeah.
What questions are you asking her? You know, when you put that phone to your face and you say, Siri, where is Popeye's chicken? I'm coming right at you, right? I'm coming right at you. You know, if you have asked Siri, where is Popeye's chicken so I can get that chicken sandwich, you can just as easily say, who was Frances E.W. Harper?
Yeah.
And she will tell you, Siri will tell you everything about her.
Yeah. Yeah, you're definitely right. Yeah, we have the technology, so there's no excuse. So, Mr. Richardson, I just want to say thank you. So, hey, can you give everybody like your numbers and stuff again, so that they can contact you to get purchases? Also, your email address if they want to get in contact with you to schedule, you know, to have you come out and do Frederick Douglass or even coaching.
Sure. Yeah. So my website is www.scpublishing.com. My phone number is 757-535-1505. My email address is poetnathan1960 @gmail.com.
All right.
Wow, thank you for the opportunity to tell my story. I appreciate it. I appreciate the platform.
Hey, it was a pleasure this morning. I'm serious. Mr. Richardson, we definitely have to get you back on, because I want to talk some more about your coaching, but also Black business as well. So I definitely want to have you back on the show. So I just want to say thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. Thank you for saying yes to activism and teaching our youth and being committed. So can you give us some words of wisdom?
Oh, wow. I tell you what, why don't we do this? Why don't I, this is wisdom. This is definitely wisdom, because I was given this wisdom, and unfortunately, I lost this ancestor during COVID. I lost her due to COVID. My Aunt Gloria, who was born in Suffolk, but she lived with her kids, who had all moved up to Northern Virginia, and she was in a senior living facility up there. And I had just visited her back in February. 93 years old, but doing really good for a 93-year-old. But you know, COVID gets into the building and cuts her life short for 93. And so one of the poems that I wrote for her the elegy for her funeral is a poem called "The Seamstress," because she was a sewer. She sewed, she made clothes, she repaired clothes, and that type of thing. So this poem is called "The Seamstress," and so this is her wisdom. There are threads of your wisdom woven into our poetry, making the fabric stronger than corduroy. In a house, you ran like a well-oiled sewing machine. You stitched ripped jeans, torn flesh, threaded hope through the eye of a needle. And it was on your ironing board we learned how to keep on pressing until the rough times got smooth. Who but you could have taken a patchwork of little ragged souls and turned us into a colorful family quilt? Who but you could have fashioned us into models of character, dignified while other styles trending came and went? It was you, Mama. It was you, Grandma. It was you, sister, auntie, friend. You, the seamstress. That's it.
Wow.
Peace.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So, Mr. Richardson, you have yourself a blessed day. I want to say thank you. And I want to get some more of your books. So I'll definitely be hitting you up for some more of your books as well. So, sir, you have yourself a blessed day. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying yes to purpose. Thank you for saying yes to God. I really appreciate you, sir.
Thank you. Same here.
All right.
Love wise. Love wise.
Love wise. All right. Peace. All right, guys, that was Nathan Richardson. Oh, my God. I can't wait to put this up so you guys can hear it. So with that being said, guys, oh, my God, Mr. Richardson, he is all that in a bag of chips.
Walk in the truth that makes you free every day. Follow Brother Leon on all social media outlets.